Okie artichoke. Good morning.
Wow.
Morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful Saturday up here in the Catskills. I'm so happy to be back up here and out of New York City, although I did have fun in New York City, as I always do. Did a ton of walking, exceeded my step count every day. But boy, it sure is nice to be up here where it's completely quiet. Would you please, everyone, type in the chat where you are coming to us from today? And I will be watching. I will be here for this lovely event, and I'm very excited, but I am just listening this go round. Here we go. Iowa, California, Central Florida, New York, Atlanta, Maryland in the house. Georgianne is here supporting her friend Lisa, who you guys are, if you haven't had, and if you weren't at our first conversation with Lisa about her book, you're just gonna love this woman. I'm so excited just to sit here and listen. So as we proceed, if you have any questions or comments, please type them in the chat. Hello, Florence, Italy. My goodness, Ontario. Nakuchi, Georgia. Sati Nakuchi, Georgia. Wow. Amber Slayton, loved your book, Lisa. Hello, Lafayette, Indiana. Florence, Italy. Diane's in Florence. Somebody's traveling. That's so on brand right now for what we're going to discuss. Naples, Italy. Everyone's in, oh no, Naples, Florida. I take that back. Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Salina, Kansas. I believe it's Salina, not Selena. I think I learned that lesson once. It's somewhere in my old adult brain. South River, New Jersey. All right, everybody, without any further ado, I am going to hand everything over to the very, very incredibly brilliant Lillian Taylor, who will be moderating today's conversation with Lisa Weldon. And I thank you all for being here. I'll jump back in at the end, and I will be jumping in with your questions in the chat as I see them. Okay, ladies, take it away.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see all your faces here today. I hope you're enjoying beautiful weather wherever you are in the country and in the world, because I'm here in Connecticut and we're having another beautiful morning here, or now it's noon. Couldn't be better. So thank you for taking some time to share with us and join us in welcoming my friend, Lisa Weldon, a woman that I adore, not only personally, but professionally. And I know you will too, if this is the first time you're going to meet her. So when we were talking about what this should look like, we thought fundamentally, let's start at the beginning, because everyone here has a different level of travel experience, right? I'm sure many of you are seasoned travelers. Many of you maybe were, and when COVID happened, things maybe slowed down and stopped, and maybe we all just need a little jump start again. So we thought it'd be a great way to begin this series today, travel and adventure, traveling solo, with kind of the basics, going back to the basics of traveling by yourself and what that means. And Lisa and I, after talking about it, we were like, well, you know what? We don't want anybody to feel like traveling, that overwhelming feeling of reservations at the airport, the train stations, passports, packing for 10 days, all of that. An adventure can happen when you step outside your door, if you make it happen. I mean, that's where I'm at. I really just have not been doing much of anything. But when we started talking about what's right outside your door, whether it's in your community or in the neighboring city, there are so many things that are right there before us that we might even drive by. I was saying, I used to drive by a sign almost every day about the Daughters of American Revolution House Museum that I drove by it for probably 20 years before I actually stopped and went in it. And not only did I enjoy the experience, I learned a lot too. So we just want to plant that seed and invite you to join in this conversation today about what you'd like and how you'd like to jumpstart your traveling solo, whether it's in the neighboring city or jumping on a jet and getting out of Dodge. So here's my friend. I'm glad I made you smile, Lisa Weldon. I am going to turn this over to you now, and let's talk.
Well, I see some familiar faces. Thank y'all for supporting me and being here. A lot of you know, and I also see some faces that are much more well-traveled than I am. I see my friend Annie, who's been to probably every continent, and I think Diane is in Italy, and she just texted me and said this was her first solo trip. And my friend Georgianne, who's planning a trip to Alaska by herself. So yeah, this is fun. This is going to be fun. Like Lillian said, you don't have to have a big budget. You don't have to go somewhere crazy like I did to China. One of the most fun things I've done recently is I've just gone right over here, about a mile away, gotten on the subway in Atlanta, parked my car, and just rode the subway downtown and got off with no agenda in my mind and walked all the way back, 3 stops, got on the subway, came back to my car. And the things that I saw were the Martin Luther King Museum, which has been here for forever. I'd never been to it. I walked through an area called Cabbagetown that is really hot that I'd never been to, but I just had the best day. Oh, and one of the most fun things was when you're on a subway, you always go behind buildings. So you wouldn't believe all the graffiti behind buildings that you can only see from the subway. So again, you don't have to do anything wild like go to China or Istanbul or crazy things like that. There's plenty to see right in your own town. So anyway.
So what would you say to someone who is just getting started right now, that we're here in this moment right now? What would your words of encouragement be to, if they feel like they don't know where to start, even in their own state or community, to research it, to maybe talk with other people, friends, people that they're comfortable with? How would you encourage someone to step outside their comfort zone and start their solo travel journey? And one thought for me when I was thinking about this is, I don't know how many of you are like this, but I know a lot of women who won't even go sit in a coffee shop by themselves and have a cup of coffee and talk with other people, complete strangers, right? And so when I was thinking about that, I've never been like that because, as you can tell, I'm never at a loss for words. And it's more comfortable, I think, when you don't know the person. So that's a way for me to think about starting that journey instead of feeling overwhelmed traveling solo. Maybe that's the beginning of maybe just having going to a coffee shop by yourself, going and having breakfast by yourself. What words of encouragement would you give to someone who really wants to do it, but doesn't know how to do it?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing would be to do it simply. Go to a movie by yourself. I mean, how many of us love going to a movie by ourselves? We're scared to death to. Or go to a play by yourself, or go to a restaurant and eat by yourself. That to me is one of the hardest things. If you can get past eating by yourself, then you're good to get on an airplane and go wherever. And I'd say start easy, start close to home. Go to maybe if you want to veer off a little bit away from home, go to places that are already pre-planned, like go on a church retreat by yourself, or go to like I went to a writing conference in Montana. I knew it was all pre-planned and I knew there'd be people there, but just getting from here to there, it was an experience for me. So I would say, to begin, just let somebody else plan it. Do something easy and simple. Start being comfortable with yourself in different situations. Get a cabin 2 hours away in the mountains and go away to a cabin or to a beach that's nearby where there are a lot of people. I have to tell you a funny story about a cabin in the North Georgia mountains. I applied for a writing residency and I got awarded 2 weeks up in North Georgia in the mountains, and I got my own, every writer got their own cabin. And the first night I was there, the bed was right beside a window, and the curtains that they had on the window didn't cover the entire window. So all I could imagine was somebody, now I was in the middle of the woods in the mountains. All I could imagine was somebody peeping inside those windows, and I couldn't sleep. I was scared to death. So the next day I drove all the way in town to Walmart and got bigger curtains. But where I may feel comfortable in a city, I am still scared in the mountains. So I keep pushing myself to go to the mountains and go in the woods. So at that retreat, they had the most beautiful walking trails. And not once in 2 weeks did I go step my foot in that mountain on those trails, because I was sure that a bear was going to get me. So the next time that I went to that writing retreat, I said, you are not going to stay unless you go spend 30 minutes in those woods. And of course, my phone didn't work too. So I had no phone service to call for help. But I did it. I spent 30 minutes in there, and then I spent an hour. And I'll never forget going back to all the writers had dinner together. And I told them that I had finally conquered my fear. And somebody said, what do you think? Somebody's going to come all the way up there looking just for you so they can peep and anoint you. But I would say there's a lot of fears in going by yourself. There's a lot of fears of, maybe getting sick, maybe having a medical emergency. There are fears of being lonesome. There are fears of having to eat alone. There are fears of it's too much, it's too big to plan all this stuff. Just start simple. Okay. Just start simple. And then once you do it once, then you want to take that next step. Mm-hmm. Then the next step, and then you want to go wild.
I think I have a question here, but just by a show of hands in your chat, how many people have already traveled solo? How many people that are here today traveled solo? And are you looking to do more of it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's a good amount of people, and that's why you're here today, right? So yeah. We've talked about taking the first step, whether you've done it before and just haven't done it in a while, or just want to do it. Maybe, Lisa, we should move more into the conversation of if and when you're ready to take the next step for a bigger trip. Maybe it's your first time taking a bigger trip. And I know you have a lot of thoughts, stories, and experiences about for every budget, right? So there's a lot of us that we definitely have a budget. Some of them, the budget is maybe more modest than others, but Lisa has thoughts and experiences on how to start thinking about this budget and how you're going to travel and how you're going to stay and how to put take advantage of resources that are out there in order to start planning something. So Lisa, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, one of the reasons I like to travel solo is because I travel on a tight budget. And I don't want to ever feel pressured to, a lot of people love to stay in nice hotels. That doesn't appeal to me. Or going out to real fancy restaurants, that doesn't really appeal to me. So that's one of the reasons I like to travel alone. But there are just so many ways to do it that don't cost a lot of money. A lot of you know that I go to New York a lot, and that sounds so fancy, doesn't it? Well, I've got several friends up there who I cat sit for, and they go off to places, to their vacation homes or whatever, and I move into their apartment and cat sit for 2 weeks. There are a lot of different type of hotels. My favorite hotel in New York, some of you may be shocked if you saw it, but it's the only hotel in the West Village, and it's called the Jane. And let me tell you how old it is. The people that survived the Titanic came and stayed in it. Wow. And the reason I love it, and it's cheap, it's super cheap. It's like $100 a night, and that's cheap for New York. That's really cheap for New York. And they have, their rooms are like train cabins. It's 25 square feet. There's a single bed up against the wall, a mirror and hooks on the other wall, and a bathroom down the hall. Now I can hear a lot of you going, yeah. Well, let me tell you why I love it so much. Number one, it's in the West Village, which is my very favorite neighborhood in all of Manhattan. And it's the only hotel, and the location. The other reason I love it is the very first time I stayed there, I put on my little robe and walked down the hall, and there stood at the sink, brushing his teeth, the most gorgeous Australian young man. And he turned and said, "Morning." Well, I keep thinking I'll be that lucky every time I stay, and I won't. But they have a cafe downstairs, and a lot of Europeans stay in this is like a European hotel. A lot of Europeans stay in this hotel, and you wouldn't believe all the people I've met. Yeah, bathrooms down the hall is not the best, but I love it.
Well, Arla says that it sounds like it's similar to staying in a hostel, right?
It is. It's very similar, but you have your own room and all that. And they also have rooms that have bathrooms too. Again, I said I was cheap. So, and then Australian, I keep looking for that Australian man, but
and Megan has actually been there. Megan's saying, right, Megan, that you've actually stayed at the Jane. So that there's someone that's familiar with it.
Wow.
Yeah, the rooms are very, very tiny.
Yeah.
Very small, because it was originally for sailors. And so they made the rooms deliberately like cubicles that they would find on their ships. Very tiny.
Interesting.
I'm never in my room when I'm in New York. So I come in.
That's true.
I crash and I get up and I'm gone the next day. But there's a lot, like if you want to travel in other places in the world, there are pet sitting services or house swapping services. A lot of people go on vacation. They just want somebody in the house. And, you'll go through an interview process and it's free. So, I mean, other than a registration fee, but it's the cost should not be an issue. So.
Well, I actually have some good friends that retired 5 years ago, and they did the house swapping in Australia, the first experience for 6 weeks. And they had an incredible experience that they did it for the next 3 years, 6 weeks at a time. And so they were in Australia, in New Zealand, and I think they were in England. And every time it was a wonderful experience. And honestly, I had never really heard of it before. And you don't have to have a house to do it. In the city, you can have an apartment, and they had an incredible experience. They did it 3 years in a row. So that's another option that maybe some people hadn't heard of or considered, but it's a wonderful option. And like you said, the pet sitting, there's a couple of really reputable sites, and these places are anywhere in the world that you can do this for. So that's another option for those of us who are on a tight budget.
And Lillian, one of the things that I don't like trip planning at all. I find a neighborhood, I get an Airbnb, and I get an airline ticket. And that's really all the planning I do. And I'm also a type of travel. I mean, my dream job is to travel everywhere and just talk to people and get stories. I love hearing stories about people. And so that's why I hate traveling with a schedule. I really like to travel as a resident and not as a tourist. And going to the grocery stores. When I was in Shanghai, first thing I did when I got in my little apartment was I went to the grocery store because I had stocked my refrigerator. And of course, I couldn't read any of the labels, but they were the most beautifully designed packaging of anywhere I've ever seen in my life. So I just went around picking up stuff because of the designs, and I just learned so much about the food. And I loved watching the dads take their kids to preschool versus the moms like are here. I went on a college campus in Shanghai, and it was a beautiful college campus. It looked just like an Ivy League school here, beautiful old buildings and everything. And I sat down on a bench and just watched the kids, and how much they were, like our kids. And all of a sudden, here comes this little moped. He comes in, the door of the dorm opens, and a kid with pajama pants gets out and picks up his pizza and takes it all upstairs. And I'm like, this is just like in America. And I know that sounds probably not very exciting, but that's the kind of stuff I like to see, the real stuff, the real life of people that, and I do like to see the buildings and the cathedrals and things like that, but I would skip a cathedral or the Eiffel Tower any day to sit in a park and talk to a mother. Or, I taught when I was in New York one time. I was I was in East Harlem, and the street was closed off, and it was a summer camp on the hot streets of New York. And I just sat down on the curb and watched those kids have summer camp that was so different from what my kids experienced. I was in Istanbul during Ramadan, and, of course, they fasted all day. And then at night, all of a sudden, here come all these families with picnic baskets. They come to the lawn at the mosque, set out their picnic blankets, just like we do on July the 4th. The Bloodmobile was there. The barbecue pits were set up. And I just loved watching folks that were different from me, a different religion, and how they interacted. I mean, that to me is why I travel, is just to see people. They're, to me, the most interesting things. Now, some beautiful mosque in Istanbul. It's some incredible history, but yeah.
You want to experience the culture as well as see things. Yeah. I see where Lisa Daly said is talking about train travel. How many people? I've never done any real train travel. Have you done in your traveling, Lisa? Maybe speak to that, and maybe Lisa can give us a little more insight into train travel.
I've done very little other. I've done the subway here in Atlanta that I just spoke to. I've done a speed train from Paris to the countryside in France. I did a rail pass when I was younger. My friend and I got a Eurail pass. That was fun. But no, I haven't done that much. I haven't.
So that's maybe something we can talk about in the future, look into,
Right.
right? But someone also is very interested in hearing a little bit more about your time in Istanbul.
Oh, if I could go back, my wildest trip was Shanghai because there was nothing in English and they don't allow Google. So I was kind of plopped in and lost. In Istanbul, the reason I ended up in Istanbul was my cousin married a Greek man and had her wedding on a Greek isle. And I said, while we're here, we're so close, let's go to Istanbul. And it was my sister and two of my children went. And we rented an Airbnb in the old part of Istanbul. And first day I told him, I said, I'm going to go off by myself and walk the city, and which I did. And it was unbelievable. I'll never forget, literally within the first 2 hours of getting moved into my Airbnb, which was 4-bedroom, 4-bath, and I think we paid $100 a night. It was unbelievable, right in the old town. But the first day, tooling around Istanbul, taking pictures and everything. And there's this levee that goes down to the river. And I thought, well, I'm going to go sit, and there were people sitting on it. And so I thought I must just take a break and kind of look through the shots I've taken and stuff. And so I find my place, I sit down, and all of a sudden people start turning around and looking at me. And there were people walking by looking at me, stopping and looking at me. And, I sort of like, what have I done wrong? I'm just sitting here, Well, then all of a sudden I look around and they're all men and they're all smoking cigars and they're all, I think it was women weren't allowed area. So I got up and left. But Istanbul was phenomenal. The tile work and like I said, the Ramadan and the way they worship and the clothing and the rugs and the spices and the markets and the woven, and I keep telling all these stories. Y'all hush me up if I talk too much, but so they don't eat. Muslim, during Ramadan, don't eat until sunset, I think, or 7 or sunset or whatever. So you go to these restaurants because there's still tourists in there, and the waiters are just so glad to see you. And so one day I went into a restaurant, plopped down, and the waiter came and pulled up a chair and started talking to me. We sat there and talked for an hour and a half, and he told me all about the regimes and how the new regime wants women to start wearing the full headdress again, and they want to get rid of Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff. Again, I learned so much that I would have never learned had I been on a strict schedule. And but then again, I'll never forget going into the history, the National History Museum, and there was a line in front of one of these rooms, and they only let 3 people in at a time. And when it was my turn, it was dark, and it was maybe 5 feet by 8 feet, a tiny little room, and an armed guard. And I had no idea what I was walking into. And he pointed out that the oldest biblical relics were in this room. David's hand bracelet, Joseph's so-and-so. And tell me about getting chill bumps. And then right next to that room, there was an Amman, I think that's pronounced a priest, kind of, and also an armed guard. And in that room were the oldest Islamic relics. Unbelievable to me. It was, I still get chill bumps, but anyway, if y'all have a chance to go to Istanbul, go.
That's
Hey, Lisa.
incredible. That's incredible.
Lisa, Lily and I actually have a question. Hi, everyone. It's Nicole. I've been reading through the chat. I think one of the things I'm seeing we'd love to hear from you is how did you even get started? So take us back to when you're researching and really thinking about, where you want to go, how you get the confidence really to then make that decision to go. Is one question. And then the other I just don't want to forget is the resources. Someone had asked a question, what pet resourcing or house sitting resources? And we can certainly share that post to this conversation, but I didn't want to ignore that question that was in the chat.
Okay, so how did I get started? First of all, I'm an Air Force brat, and I grew up behind my father as he flew an airplane. So I feel more comfortable in an airplane than a car. And I lived in 10 different cities before I graduated from high school. So I'm used to moving around and having a lot of newness around, which most of you hopefully didn't have to move that many times. But I think that's where I got my wanderlust gene. But to answer the question, if I'm going to a city, for instance, I had plans to go to Tel Aviv. The first thing I did was I Googled neighborhoods. And whichever city you're going into, Google the neighborhoods and figure out which neighborhood feels more comfortable to you. Is it near tourist attractions? Is it near artist colonies or whatever? But that's the first thing I do is I Google neighborhoods. Once I Google a neighborhood, then I go to Airbnb or VRBO. They're both kind of work the same way. And I can put that neighborhood into the search bar and they will give me all the apartments or homes that are available. And you can see on a map, for instance, when I was doing my Tel Aviv trip, I wanted to be within walking distance of the Mediterranean. So, I looked in my price range, I looked in my neighborhood, found one that was walkable to the Mediterranean, and that's the one I booked. The other thing to look at in a lot of cities is transportation. Obviously, New York and Paris have very sophisticated rail systems, and you can get anywhere, anytime. But some of the other places might be a little more difficult. And unless you're going to rent a car, which I never really have, I don't think. Yeah, maybe one time when I went to the south of France, we got a car, but I made my sister drive. I'm not the best driver. But so that's the third thing I'd look for is public transportation. You want the safety of a neighborhood where you feel real safe, price range. And that's really how I get started. I literally just get an airline ticket and an Airbnb before I go. I mean, I rarely buy tickets to museums. I rarely buy tickets to, plays and things like that. I travel pretty loosey-goosey, but it works out. It works out.
Can I, one of the questions that I have for you, and I see Beverly Willett just put it in the chat, is I wanted you to speak a little bit about safety when you're traveling and, how the precautions and how much time and effort, maybe even in your research, when you were Googling neighborhoods and determining where you're going to stay, how do you get information about the safety? Beverly Willett has asked you to speak to that as well.
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying that I was in Mexico on 9/11. And luckily I was with two friends, but all the airwaves were shut down. Not only were all the airwaves shut down, all the ATM machines were shut. The embassy line was busy. And any car that we tried to rent to get out of the country was gone. And talk about safety, that was probably the most frightened I've ever been, because I could not get to my children. And even the phone lines were so busy. So all of us Americans in the hotel would go to the airport every morning and sit on the floor like refugees, hoping the airwaves would be opened and there'd be a flight that would go out. We did that for 3 mornings until we finally figured out how to get out. And my story of how I got out of that situation is probably one of the most interesting blog posts I've written. And if you go to my website, lisaweldon.com, search 9/11, and it's worth reading. And the reason I say read it is because the people of Mexico could not have been kinder to us. They knew our fear. They provided food for us. They it was unbelievable. And then on the floor of the airport, I had a CEO sitting next to me on one side, and then on the other side, a young couple on their honeymoon who was running out of money. We all took care of each other psychologically. We all listened to each other's stories. We would sit there for hours waiting for a plane. Now, I was to the point, my little group, we wanted just a plane to the Mexican border, and we figured we'd walk across the border if we had to. We were desperate. And the story of how it all happened, I'll go into it a little bit. We flew to Monterrey, came into the gate, and the gate agent says, run fast. There's a small plane that's got 16 seats. Go get them. I have no idea who paid for it. We landed in Houston. They had hotel rooms ready for us, and they had flights, national, flights home for us as soon as we could get out. I found out that our American government, U.S. government, took care of us and paid for all of that. They knew where we were. They took care of us. But the other part is, I want to say, my sister went to Ethiopia to photograph an orphanage over there, and she got sick off something she ate. Those people were good to her. They were so good to her. I've had a friend who had appendicitis on an airplane flying into Paris, and waiting for her when she landed was an ambulance and took her to the hospital, and everything was taken care of. I'll never forget when I landed in New York for those 30 days that I walked, I realized that I had no one there that I knew to call. And I had walked that day, and I hadn't seen a hospital or a doc in a box or anything. And it was a moment of panic. But the safety part of it. Now, I've had some experiences. I was at an ATM machine in Paris, and 3 little schoolgirls in their school uniform came up to me, and I had read, Gypsy children will try to scam you. I was prepared. I shoot them off. They didn't get my money. So bottom line, get travel insurance. Get travel insurance. Medicare does not pay for a jet to bring you back home. So it's well worth it to get travel insurance. But just be smart. I was in Shanghai one night, and I really wanted to go to a concert in this really cool building about 2 miles away. And it was dark, and I knew it. I bought the ticket anyway. But I thought, is this stupid, Lisa? Well, I just went outside my little neighborhood, and it was as lively as it was at 12 noon, and I felt totally fine. But, if I could say anything, I would say people are good, and they will take care of you if you have an emergency. They do. I mean, whether it's Mexico, whether it's different places all over the world, this is not safety, But I walked in the cutest little place in Shanghai, a little restaurant, and I thought it was a salad bar. So I go along, get all my little ingredients in my big bowl and go to pay for it. And they take my bowl away. I don't, huh? And came back a few minutes later with, they had put soup in my bowl. It was a soup place, not a salad bar. And so I went, I found myself a table and sat down, and I realized I didn't have any silverware, and I'm kind of looking around. I cannot speak the language. I cannot read anything. I can't do Google Translate. And all of a sudden, this young man comes over, opens up a heated drawer, and hands me a spoon for my. People are good. I mean, if you have, obviously, if you have a medical emergency, professionals will take care of you. And but people are good, you know. So I don't really, I'm not stupid, don't get me wrong. Well, sometimes maybe I do go behind some buildings looking for good graffiti. I love graffiti. And I probably go some places I probably, I do it in the daytime, you know, but just be smart, aware.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, this goes back more towards the beginning of our conversation here, but I didn't want to forget to mention it. Shelley has mentioned, she in the comments, and you and I have had this conversation, Lisa. She says basically it's about the planning for her. She, you know, she would feel the need to do all that planning. And you and I have recently had that conversation. So I guess I would ask you to speak to that. As you and I talked about, I would be that way maybe a few years ago, that I would get so overwhelmed by all the planning and, you know, making sure every step was accounted for, that it would be overwhelming and I might abandon it. But as you say, you pick a space, you know, get your transportation, and then you go from there. So how would you encourage Shelley and other people not to get mired down with the whole planning stage before they even get started?
Well, there's two kind of travelers. They're kind of people like me, like to just go be spontaneous and see what I find. And there are people that want to make sure they see everything when they get there. My sister's that way. And thank goodness, I've been on trips with her and she has planned certain things, and I'm glad she did, because I would have missed it. So planning is not a bad thing. It's just not my thing. Planning, I think it can get overwhelming if you, I don't know. I think I go back to this: buy the airline ticket and buy your place. And then you're stuck. Then you have to go. But I have seen people plan and never go. And they may enjoy that part of it. But if they get so overwhelmed with the planning, and it can get overwhelming to make sure you're going to the right restaurant, to make sure you're going to get all this in and everything. But if you've got that airline ticket and that hotel room or Airbnb, then you got to get on that airplane and not put it off. So those are kind of.
It kind of leads to what, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. It kind of leads to Maureen had put in the chat. So what do you do? How do you begin when you find yourself in a foreign city, you land, and her question is like, where do you begin, like, to find a place to stay?
Well, I love Airbnb. I've used it, VRBO as well, but I like Airbnb because they're vetted, and you can find certain things. If you need good Wi-Fi, or if you need this, or you need a bathtub, or you whatever, you can filter all that and find your apartment really easy on Airbnb. Airbnb also has experiences. If you want to do a graffiti walk or whatever, you can get that on Airbnb. Okay, my mind just left me. The first things I do. So the first things I do is when I landed in Shanghai, I stayed in a hotel the first night. And the reason I did is because I had a friend somewhere in China And I emailed her and I said, are you anywhere near Shanghai? And she said, well, I'm a flight away. And I said, well, you want to come visit for the weekend? You know, she taught. And she said, yes. She said, but get a hotel with a bathtub. Okay. And she said, there are not many bathtubs in China, and I just need a good long American bath. So the good thing about, I'm getting around to that point, was there was a desk clerk that spoke English, you know, broken English. And so what he did was he gave me a business card with the address of the hotel, and on the back of it, he wrote in Chinese, take me to this hotel or whatever. So I could, if I was in a cab, I could just show him the business card and whatever. But after my friend left, I walked to where my Airbnb was. And I don't know if any of y'all saw the attachment, but it was a really scary looking place. A lot of wires hanging down, a lot of clotheslines and all this and everything. And I almost turned around and went back to the hotel. But now I said, no, the people look okay. They don't look like they're going to hurt me. So I kind of pushed through, went up 3 stories, and there was my little Airbnb. It was absolutely adorable, IKEA furnished apartment. The first thing I did, back to the question was, first thing I do anytime I land is I go to the grocery store to stock my refrigerator. And that just sort of gives me a sense of the place, a sense that's an easy job to do. And I stock my little refrigerator and start there. And I've attacked cities in different ways. Some cities I just roam through. In New York, I took a map of Manhattan and sliced it into 20 pieces, and I took 1 piece per day and went to that place, that neighborhood. In Istanbul, I just roamed. They have a grand market, and I really wanted to do that. And a few little things that I had on my list to do. So I started with that. So yeah, I start with a grocery store every time. Even when I go to New York to cat sit, I'll go to the grocery store.
That makes sense to me. I mean, that's universal, right? It's our comfort. Like the refrigerator is stocked. I have like my footing, right? Now I can get started. So it absolutely makes sense.
And
you
know what? I mean, it's sort of, I have this little ritual. I go to the grocery store, I come back, I stock the refrigerator, I kind of sit down, get over the flight, have a glass of wine, and kind of toast that I made it, you know? I mean, it's silly little things, but
No, it's not. I don't think it's silly at all. And while we're talking about food, Diane had in the chat, she asked you if you wouldn't mind speaking about when you're traveling solo, selecting a restaurant and eating alone.
That's what I hate to do the worst. That is the hardest thing for me. And I try to have something to look at, whether it's a book or my phone, or if I'm somewhere writing, I take my manuscript. That is hard. Now, what I have found is that waiters take care of you more than anybody else if you're eating alone. I also try to find places that have bars where the bartender is, because that gives you a person on either side to talk to, and they always talk to you. They always engage, even in New York. But you know, that's the hardest for me. That's the hardest. I haven't conquered that yet. There are a lot of nights that I will go and again to the grocery store and buy something and come home. But the nights or the days, there's a little place in the West Village in New York called 11th Street Cafe. And every time I stay, I go in there, and it's just a sliver of a restaurant. And there's some bar stools up against the wall. And I'll just go in there, sit at one of the bar stools, and you watch the neighbors come in and out, and the people that are cooking the food know everybody, and people will talk to you. So I would say go to restaurants with bars. You know, when I say bar stools that surround a bartender, things like that. That's probably the easiest. I had a place in New York that I went and sat kind of over to the side, and the waitress came and sat with me, and we talked. I went early before the crowds, and we talked all about growing up. I mean, she must have sat there for 30 minutes. So again, people are good. People are good, and they take care of you.
Well, I agree with you. I just find I've never had a problem having coffee by myself or even having lunch by myself, but I always have my backup. I have a book or something to look at. This is even pre-phones, when we were always, now it's easy on your phone. But I find that when you're on your own anywhere, people tend to talk to you. Right. And I've had some incredible conversations and met some really interesting people that I know if I wasn't sitting there by myself, they would have never even started a conversation. I think sometimes when it's women, it's because they feel sorry for you. Right. Like, oh, she must be so uncomfortable. She's sitting there by herself. I'm really not. I don't mind sitting there as long as I have my book or whatever. But
well, what I have found is, if as soon as you tell them you're traveling alone, they're interested. And then start asking them questions like, what's the neighborhood like? Where is the best so-and-so? And they really light up when you put the light on them, and they'll welcome you. And again, one time in New York, I was eating by myself, and somebody said, you need to come to our church this Thursday night. And it was they were doing a Cajun music festival at their church. And he was just on me about coming. And I did. And when I walked in that church, he said, come on over here. Annie, where's Annie? I think she was with me. Anyway, people are just, they'll take care of you.
And when you say that, it makes me think we have to, in order for people to take care of us too, is, we have to trust people. And we all have a guard up at some point, some more than others. And I guess that translates into being approachable too. And there's nothing wrong with having a guard up, but we need to understand within our body language what we are projecting, so that people are invited to have just to say hello or have a conversation. How many times have you been like in line at the bank? Well, when we used to go to the bank, I'm going to say the grocery store, and you strike up a conversation with someone, they look at you like, I don't know you, why are you talking to me? So, but then there are other people who you can sit while you're in line, walking through the line, and have fabulous conversation. So part of what my experience is, it's the energy that I'm putting out to the world to invite people to have a conversation, even if it's a 5-minute conversation.
And you know what else is, a lot of times we'll go to other countries with preconceived notions of what the people are like, and they have preconceived notions about what Americans are like.
Right.
And this is such an opportunity to break down those barriers with people. Be curious about them, ask them questions. And we were in Panama, the country of Panama, one time, and we looked up, my sister was with me, we looked up, and it was a machine shop, and there was a sign in Spanish that says, we don't like ugly women. And I looked up at him, and all of a sudden they all kind of blushed and looked down. And so we started talking to them, and we started asking them questions, about Panama, about what they do and all this and everything. They ended up inviting us up to their apartment. Oh, my sister's a photographer. She had all this big photo equipment, cameras around her neck. And he said, you must go see our apartment. And so we went up these long, skinny steps. So we had no idea where we were going. And we go into this apartment. He's got a big, huge picture window that overlooks downtown Panama City. And in other words, he was saying, this is the most beautiful shot in all of Panama. But be curious about them. Ask them questions. Be open to their invitations. Don't be scared of their invitations. Don't be scared of their culture if it's different from us. I mean, that's how we all, that's how we're going to all get together if we're just curious about each other.
Right. Someone else, and I think the name wasn't on it, but this is another great question. I'm so glad that you all are so engaged and
on this note, I'm going to interject. We have about 5 minutes left.
oh wow, it's going fast. So
Fast.
they just wanted to know, have you ever met a stranger in your travels that you have stayed in touch with?
Let's see. Yes, in New York.
Mhm.
I went up to there's a 24-hour writing place on 14th Street, New York. And I went up there and I'm walking up 3 stories of steps. The door opens and this woman says, "Hey, Lisa." She was a Facebook friend of mine.
Wow.
And she ended up, it was her home that I cat sit while she was in London for 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah.
That's great. Melissa, then I guess since we are down to the last few minutes, I'm not sure, Melissa, if you want to close this out here. I just want to say thank you, everyone. This is just the beginning of this series. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And Lisa, I just never tire of talking, listening, and hearing all your wisdom and everything you have to share. So thank you so much for today. And I look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was just terrific. And I had like so much valuable information. And I could actually harken back to so many different travel situations that I've experienced in my own life, whether alone or not. And I so appreciate all the information. And I think I'm really excited about the rest of the series, as I'm sure you all are, so we can get even more information about how to go about these things. I think maybe there might be value. Nicole and I will have a conversation about possibly putting together a list of recommendations of websites you can go to for house sharing, pet sitting, maybe at some point. Maybe Lisa will work on that with us since she's navigated this. So we're recommending websites that are safe and situations that are safe for you. I just want to thank you ladies again for being here. Nicole, do we have anything fun and new to announce? We seem like we have things brewing, but nothing in the
there's always good things to announce. No, I think that the most important thing, obviously, seeing, and we've done these sessions before, is everyone had their cameras on, which was pretty remarkable. It was great to see everybody today. That in and of itself is incredible. Besides our app and the things that we have going on in our app, we ourselves too are going on another trip soon, another photo shoot. So we've got a lot of new exciting things coming for fall, including Lisa's series on travel, which she bravely helps us all navigate through. And I think Lisa's even taught us all, there's so much even outside of our own doors. We saw a lot of questions in the chat about some bad experiences potentially with travel. And I would just say, step outside and start small, and then eventually you'll end up in a much different place, like Lisa has taught all of us. So there's always something going on to answer your question, Melissa. Just stay tuned. We've got a lot of exciting events, including Lisa's series, kicking off throughout the next few months.
Amber just popped in to ask when the yoga instruction is. Amber, we're looking at sometime this
Mid-August.
Mid-August. We're kind of leaning towards calling it August. Get it? That way. So we hope you have a lovely August, and we will see you soon with more fun workshops. This series will continue. New products will be coming to the app.